Welcome back to Springs Church Leadership Podcast. I want to start by taking a moment to make an assessment of what our world has been going through for the last 2 years. Now, I know that everyone's tired of talking about the chaos caused by the pandemic, but it's important in this episode that we recognize and we put into words what we all know and are feeling. The world has been through 2 years of extreme trauma. The pandemic shut down the world. We've had over 6 million deaths worldwide. Depression and suicide was and is on the rise. We've had political division, ongoing racial tension. Now we have supply chain issues where you can't get anything delivered to you. A possible global war that's happening between Russia and Ukraine, which could constitute nuclear threats. We have soaring inflation. We have soaring wages. The Fed is raising the interest rates. We've had the Great Resignation, where we're dealing with the high employee turnover. Our kids are behind in school. Many children are having trouble socially. Drug addiction is on the rise. And this list is just a small segment of what we've all been facing in this season of intense chaos. And everyone and everything is unsettled. Now, this is important because most of us, if not all of us, have never been asked by God to lead through a season like this before. A season that's filled with continual chaos and trauma. And here's the mistake that I was making trying to lead the staff and the church well over these past 2 years. See, I had my head down trying to push through and keeping everyone motivated and moving forward so we could get through this difficult season. That number one, I didn't realize the toll that the trauma and the turmoil took on me. And number two, I didn't realize the toll that this season took on our staff and the people that God had called me to lead. Now, I want to talk about those two things for the next couple of minutes together. Number one, I didn't realize the toll that the trauma and the turmoil took on me. 1 Kings chapter 19, 1-6 says this. When Ahab got home, he told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, including the way he killed all the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah. May the God strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I've not killed you just as you killed them. Elijah was afraid and he fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors who have already died. Then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, get up and eat. He looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Now, many of you know this Bible story. This is Elijah, the great Old Testament prophet, and this is right after Elijah challenged the 450 prophets of Baal to a showdown on the top of Mount Carmel. Elijah had just walked through an intense season of being stretched in his faith and believing God for the miraculous. He was stretched in times of prayer and pouring himself out emotionally, and after all this enduring and fighting and believing and praying, he heads to Jezreel. Why? Because Jezreel was the capital city in Elijah's day. Elijah must have thought that God was going to turn the whole country around. He must have thought that Ahab and Jezebel would finally repent after what they saw on Mount Carmel. And the season of dysfunction and chaos and famine and trauma for the nation would finally be over. But then Elijah finds out that it's not over. In fact, things got worse because now Jezebel wanted to kill him. So Elijah heads out to the wilderness, completely depleted, and he falls down next to a broom tree where he prays that God would take his life. Now stop right there, because Elijah is in a pretty terrible place. I don't think Elijah realized the toll that the last couple of years of hiding from King Ahab and going through a national drought and famine and facing all the demonic forces that were destroying his people and praying for God's mercy and a move of rain to come and trying to correct and encourage the Israelites. All of that, he didn't realize the toll that it took on him. Elijah was dealing with and walking through a lot of trauma in his life and in his leadership. And Elijah wasn't just tired. Elijah was depleted. How do I know that? Because he didn't just fall down under the broom tree and take a nap. No, he prayed that God would take his life. And a man who prays a prayer like that is depleted. And this is the part I want you to understand. Some of you have been working so hard through this pandemic, keeping your head down and your hands to the plow for your family, for your boss, for your business, for your church, for yourself, that you didn't realize the toll that all this craziness around you in your life has taken on you. Now, please hear me on this. Many of you are not just tired right now, you are depleted. And there's a big, big difference between the two. When you're tired, you could take a nap. You could go on vacation. You could take some time off and everything will be all right. But you're not just tired, you're depleted. And here's the difference. When you're depleted, you don't just need time off, you need time to refill. Did you hear that? When you're depleted, you don't just need time off, you need time to refill. Look back at the story of Elijah. When Elijah fell down under the broom tree, notice the two things that God didn't do. Number one, God didn't just let him sleep it off. God didn't say, well, Elijah's just tired, and after a good nap, everything will be fine. And number two, God didn't just zap him with a miraculous lightning bolt from heaven that made everything right again. No. Instead, God sends an angel that touches Elijah and then cooks him some food, cooks him a cake. Elijah was physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally depleted. And the picture of an angel coming and cooking food and waking Elijah up and telling him to eat is a picture of a man that is being refilled or replenished by God's goodness and grace. Now, why didn't God just baptize Elijah with a fresh baptism of the Holy Spirit, make him get up and go back to work? Because God is teaching us something about the way he designed us and the way we operate as humans. God's teaching us in our leadership and our walks with him that we need to take the initiative not just to rest, but to refill. To do something that builds our faith, that engages our minds in a new way, that recaptures our attention and our excitement. So how do we do that? What is the cake that God has prepared for us that helps us refill? Well, here it is, and I want you to write this down because this is important. Here it is, ready? You have to find something that helps you disconnect your mind. If you're like me, you can never turn off thinking about all the problems in your leadership or in the world or in your family or at work or in the church. You keep going around in your head. And as you grow in your leadership and in greater responsibilities that God entrusts to you, this gets worse and worse. From the moment I wake up in the morning to when I go to bed at night, all I'm thinking about are the issues and the conflicts and the problems everywhere and in every sphere of influence in my life. And the only way to stop it and refill is you need to disconnect your mind. Well, how do I do that, Pastor Michael? Well, this is important, and I want you to hear me on this. It's different for everyone. Some people disconnect their minds through sports. They go and play a pickup game, basketball, or they go and play an afternoon of golf. For some, they like activities that are more quiet. Some people like to do gardening or work on a project at the house. Other people need high stimulus and excitement. They need an afternoon of going skydiving or rock climbing or skiing. For me, I spend time working on and riding old motorcycles. And when I'm in the garage and I'm putting together a top end of an engine or fixing a clutch or changing a set of bearings or reading a manual, my mind is able to disconnect from all the chaos around me and I begin to be refilled and re-energized. Last year, I took a trip out to a vintage motorcycle race that happens on the beach in New Jersey. I spent the last couple of years building a motorcycle for the race and I went out with the bike to race it. It was a full 3 days where I got to hang out in different parking lots, working on people's bikes and making new friends and riding an old 1947 vintage Harley Davidson that I built. I got to race the bike down on an 1/8 of a mile drag strip on the beach. And I remember my first race, which I won, by the way. But as I was coming through the finish line, I was crying because it was so exhilarating. Now, people have mentioned to me that I shouldn't have gone to the race because I needed to always be present at the church every Sunday, leading and preaching and engaging people. But here's the truth. If I don't take time to disengage my mind somehow from all the trauma and pressure of leading, I'll end up under a broom tree someday, hoping and praying that God takes my life like Elijah. See, in leadership, you get replenished by God first through your time at the altar, which we talked about in the last 2 episodes, but also by intentionally taking the necessary steps and permission to go and do something once in a while that disengages your mind. Okay, what I'm about to say next is extremely important. Are you ready? You have to be intentional in finding out what helps you disengage your mind and what refills you as a leader. And you have to be intentional to take the time and do this for yourself. No one else is going to do it for you. You have to take the bull by the horns and you have to make it happen. Listen to what I said. You have to make it happen. It will not happen by accident or by happenstance. You have to go and sometimes even force yourself to do it. And here's the thing. You will never have time to do the thing that disengages your mind and refills you. You have to make the time. This is what I learned over the last year by reading a book called Procrastination on Purpose. When it comes to time management and scheduling your time management is not just logical. Everyone has different tips and tools and calendars and apps and gizmos to help you manage your time better. But time management is more than just tips and tools. It's more than just being logical about when I can get to this project or when I can meet that person. See, time management is emotional as well. We schedule our time more by our emotions than with our logic. For example, every once in a while, I'll look over my monthly schedule of appointments and I'll ask myself, why am I meeting with these different people? Or why am I doing these different tasks? And many times when I ask that question, I began to realize that a lot of my appointments are not necessary. And they're not logical in the sense that they're not going to produce a lot of results or get stuff done. So why am I taking all of these appointments and busying myself with all these tasks? Because something else is driving my decisions of how to use my time instead of logic and where my time will be most impactful. Think about it. Have you ever gotten done with a really busy week and realized that you got nothing done? Why is that? Why are we so busy and yet so unable to make progress? Listen to me, because feelings of guilt and fear and worry and our desires to feel successful, valued, and important end up dictating what we do with our time more than what we know we should be doing with our time. And even though these feelings are subconscious, they end up driving how we use our time as much as what's in our inbox or what we have on our to-do list. And if we don't realize that, it can be very dangerous. Why? Because we will never take the time to detach our minds from work and leadership to refill ourselves. See, self-care and taking time to refill is the last thing our emotions will allow us to do, which means 3 things. Number 1, you have to be intentional to do it. Again, it's not going to happen by accident or by a natural flow of life. No. Number 2, you have to give yourself the permission and fight against your emotions, against yourself to do it. And number 3, because everyone is so busy, because they schedule their time according to their emotions instead of logic, people will try to make you feel guilty when you do take the time to detach and refill. I literally have to force myself to work on motorcycles or go take a ride because I will never allow myself to do it. But when I do, it gives me the grace and attachment I need to feel like myself again. Now, we'll talk about my second mistake of not noticing the toll that the pandemic took on the people that I was leading and everything that I learned from that going forward in the next episode. But for now, I want you to think about what we talked about today. Do you have something that detaches your mind and refills you? Do you know what that is? Do you understand that time management is not just logical, but emotional? And sometimes you have to fight against yourself and your emotions to be able to go do the thing that actually detaches your mind and refills you as a leader. Do you realize the toll and the trauma that this last couple of years have taken on you personally? These are just some questions that you should be asking yourself. I would write them down, journal a little bit, and we'll be back for the next episode next month. God bless Springs Church, and I hope you have a wonderful week ahead.